Hello, welcome to Bits and Pieces. I will be your host Jasper. In this video, we are going to be talking about CPUs, or Central Processing Units. The CPU is essentially the brain of the computer, and it does every single thing that the computer is doing and allows everything to function. Without a CPU, you're not able to run a PC because it will simply not turn on and not be able to do anything without a CPU. Certain things that you're going to want to look for in a CPU is the frequency of the system. The frequency is often how often a CPU can perform tasks. It is usually measured in gigahertz, and the higher value means faster processing, meaning that it can perform more actions quicker in a shorter time frame. Another spec you want to look for is the number of cores. The cores are like a CPU inside the CPU. It is a small little thing inside the CPU die. That is what it is referred to as a die. And each core is separate and individual and runs independently of all the other cores and can perform activities independently of each other. And typically, there's anywhere from 4 to 8, but it can go up to 16 cores in one CPU. Another thing you're going to want to look for is cache. Cache is dedicated random access memory, or RAM, for the CPU built into the CPU die. More cache allows for more data to be stored here for easy CPU access. Differing levels of cache exist, and the lower the number, so there's L1, L2, L3, and L4. L1 is typically the smallest, has the lowest file size, but is the fastest for the CPU to access, and level 4, L4 cache, has the highest storage space typically, but has the slowest time for the CPU to access. And so anywhere in between those, it varies based on access speed and size. Another piece to consider is the wattage, as every single PC part has a watt value, speaking to the amount of power consumed by the part. The higher the watt value means more power consumed, and typically more powerful parts, which are running faster and stronger and better, typically have higher watt values. And you want to keep your parts watt total in mind to ensure that your power supply unit can provide enough power to make sure that all of the parts turn on and function properly. There's a separate video specifically on power supplies that also brings up this point. There are some features that CPUs have that you want to look into. For example, the main feature that you definitely want to see if your CPU has, and will be a great benefit if it does have that, is a thing called multi-threading. It allows each core to create multiple threads, which each thread is able to handle one process at a time. And so it basically allows you to double or triple or quadruple or however many threads your CPU is capable of multi-threading to. It allows you to do that and have multiple processes running even per core. And another thing that you will want to look at potentially is a feature called virtualization. It is not something needed, and you don't always need to use it, but virtualization allows the CPU to run a virtual computer through various virtual machine software like VirtualBox or VMware. If you have a wish or desire to do virtual machines, you want to make sure that your CPU has the ability to use virtualization, and you must activate it within the BIOS of the system. You'll also need to consider the heat generated by the CPU and make sure that there's a proper seal on the CPU and the heatsink with fan that comes with it in the packaging. You'll also want to use thermal paste to be able to ensure that you can get that proper seal. The amount of the thermal paste isn't always necessary. It doesn't necessarily matter, but you want to make sure you get enough and a good pattern to get a good coverage of the CPU to make sure that it creates a good connection to allow good heat transfer between the two parts. You'll also want to consider the airflow of the system to ensure that the CPU doesn't overheat, because running a CPU is a very hot and very intensive process, and if it cannot get rid of that heat, it will overheat and shut down the entire system and potentially cause damage to parts, which is not something that you want.